Grand Admiral Thrawn has been one of the most complex, intelligent, and fan-favorite characters to emerge from the Star Wars expanded universe, earning a dedicated following since his inception in Timothy Zahn's heir to the Empire trilogy. As the first major villain introduced after the original trilogy, Thrawn brought a unique brand of calculated, strategic villainy that contrasted sharply with the more brute force nature of characters like Darth Vader. Over the years, Thrawn's legacy has endured, surviving Disney's acquisition of Star Wars, where many beloved elements were discarded. He has since been reintroduced in Star Wars Rebels and in a new set of novels, yet fans are still left wanting more. The demand for Thrawn to headline his own movie is not merely about nostalgia, it stems from a deeper frustration with Disney's handling of Star Wars characters and narratives. Since Disney took the reins of the Star Wars universe, the franchise has seen both highs and lows, but it's become clear to many fans that something essential has been lost in the transition. One recurring criticism is Disney's apparent preference for shallow characters who often lack depth or development. Thrawn, however, is the antithesis of this trend. His methodical approach to warfare, his strategic brilliance, and his uncanny ability to understand his enemies set him apart from almost every other antagonist in Star Wars. While Disney has introduced numerous new characters, they often seem to lack the gravitas and layered complexity that define some of the original expanded universe EU creations, Thrawn included. Characters like Rey and Kylo Ren, though central to the sequel trilogy, are widely seen as falling short of the nuanced, morally complex figures that the EU was known for producing. Many of Disney's Star Wars projects have shown a trend toward quantity over quality, resulting in a dilution of what makes Star Wars truly compelling. The franchise has suffered from the rapid production of spin-offs and standalone series that, though visually impressive, often lack meaningful character arcs or deep lore exploration. The Acolyte, for instance, aimed to dive into the mysteries of the Sith and the dark side, but early impressions and speculation suggest it might ultimately follow the same path as previous Disney projects by prioritizing spectacle over substance. Many fans worry that the storylines will be riddled with superficial conflict and one-dimensional villains, which ultimately makes these series forgettable. Thrawn stands in stark contrast to the shallow archetypes we've seen from Disney-era Star Wars. Unlike the standard good versus evil narrative that drives many Disney projects, Thrawn represents a morally ambiguous, intellectually formidable character whose actions are driven not by malice or blind loyalty, but by a cold, tactical mind focused on achieving order and stability. His motivations are not black and white. He's neither a traditional Sith nor a mere Imperial puppet. Thrawn's primary loyalty is to his own people, the Chiss, and his goal is to safeguard them from threats beyond the known galaxy. This allegiance makes him a character whose interests are not easily dismissed as simply evil or good, adding layers to his role that Disney's recent villains often lack. While Disney has poured resources into shows like The Acolyte, it's hard to ignore the stark difference in audience reception compared to shows or characters rooted in the EU, like Thrawn. The Acolyte promises dark lore exploration, yet the true intrigue of the dark side has historically been less about sheer power and more about manipulation, cunning, and philosophical conflict. Thrawn embodies these qualities even without the Force, making him a perfect candidate for a deep, sophisticated narrative that goes beyond lightsaber battles and flashy visuals. Disney's attempts at creating villains with such depth often fall short, as the characters lack the internal complexity that makes Thrawn so compelling. A standalone Thrawn movie could reinvigorate interest in the darker, more intricate aspects of Star Wars storytelling, offering a refreshing departure from the more formulaic approaches Disney has taken in recent years. In the current Disney era, Star Wars content often gravitates towards heroes who fit a fairly traditional mold, with villains who exist mainly to oppose them rather than having any intrinsic motivation or worldview. Rey, for example, is portrayed as a kind-hearted, virtuous Jedi with an innate power that seems to develop almost effortlessly. Kylo Ren, while interesting, ultimately serves as a foil to Rey rather than a fully realized character in his own right. In contrast, Thrawn is a villain who does not fall into the trap of being purely evil or malevolent. His strategic mind, his adherence to logic, and his profound respect for art and culture reveal a character who is not driven by typical Sith impulses or Imperial fanaticism. Instead, Thrawn's actions are a carefully calculated pursuit of his goals, with motivations and tactics that are as fascinating as they are unpredictable. In giving Thrawn his own movie, Disney could finally tap into the wealth of material that made him such a revered figure in the EU. Rather than reducing him to a generic antagonist role, a film could explore the complex relationship he has with both the Empire and the Chiss Ascendancy, shedding light on his origins, his philosophy, and his strategic prowess. This approach would set him apart from the villains of recent Star Wars series, who often feel rushed, underdeveloped, or too simplistic. Thrawn's characterization defies easy categorization, and his story doesn't fit neatly into the traditional Star Wars mold. Instead, he represents an opportunity to delve into the gray areas of the Star Wars universe, where loyalty, culture, and logic collide in unexpected ways. In many of Disney's recent efforts, there has been an emphasis on visual spectacle and action-driven storylines, often at the expense of character development. The series created by Disney, though visually impressive, frequently overlook the importance of crafting a compelling narrative arc or an intriguing antagonist. Characters often lack depth, with simplistic motivations that fail to resonate with fans looking for the richer, character-driven stories that once defined the EU. By contrast, Thrawn's story has always been about the interplay between intellect, strategy, and moral ambiguity. His strength as a character doesn't lie in his combat skills or his connection to the Force, but in his profound understanding of culture, his ability to dissect an opponent's psychology, and his relentless pursuit of a grander vision. A Thrawn movie would provide an opportunity to explore these unique facets in a way that Disney's recent projects have not. It could focus on his methods, his history with the Chiss, and the lengths to which he will go to protect his people, even if it means aligning himself with the Empire. Such a storyline would offer a much-needed break from the more predictable heroes and villains, as it would feature a character driven by logic, culture, and personal loyalty, rather than traditional morality. Thrawn's tactical acumen and unique approach to warfare would make for a thrilling, intellectually engaging storyline that would appeal to both hardcore Star Wars fans and new audiences. Moreover, a Thrawn movie could provide a refreshing narrative structure that goes beyond the typical Star Wars formula Disney has used in recent years. Disney's approach has often leaned towards a more episodic, formulaic style that relies heavily on nostalgic references and action-driven plots, but lacks the rich character depth and philosophical undertones that once distinguished the franchise. Thrawn's presence could change that. His character's strength lies not only in his tactical genius but also in his profound understanding of art, culture, and psychology, a stark contrast to the Force-driven mysticism or brute force strategies that are often emphasized in Disney's Star Wars narratives. Thrawn's respect for and use of art as a means of understanding his opponents offers a unique storytelling element rarely explored in mainstream Star Wars content. His fascination with art goes beyond mere admiration. It serves as a tactical advantage, allowing him to predict his adversary's actions by analyzing the underlying psyche and culture represented in their creations. This approach to strategy is not just rare in Star Wars, but rare in storytelling at large, especially within the science fiction genre. A Thrawn-centric film could dive deeply into these unique aspects of his character, giving the audience a glimpse into a world where intelligence and strategy take precedence over sheer power or mystical abilities. This would not only set Thrawn apart from the typical Disney-era villains, but would also elevate Star Wars storytelling to a level of sophistication that fans have long been yearning for. Disney's Star Wars often plays it safe with character motivations, relying on archetypes that feel oversimplified. Many Disney characters, especially antagonists, are either entirely evil or misguided individuals who find redemption. In contrast, Thrawn's moral compass is complex, as his actions are governed by a cold, logical pursuit of order rather than a desire for chaos or power. His ultimate loyalty to the Chiss Ascendancy, rather than to the Empire, adds a layer of intrigue that goes beyond the black and white morality often portrayed in recent Star Wars series. Thrawn's commitment to his people and his willingness to ally with the Empire out of necessity create an ethical tension that makes him both fascinating and unpredictable. Unlike the flat antagonists we see in series like The Acolyte, who often lack coherent motivations, Thrawn's actions are consistently driven by a blend of loyalty, cultural pride, and pragmatism. Disney's hesitance to explore morally ambiguous characters has been a recurring criticism among fans. The Star Wars universe is vast, and its most compelling stories often lie in the gray areas of morality, where characters must balance their own beliefs with the harsh realities of their galaxy. A Thrawn movie could explore these themes in a way that challenges audiences' perceptions of good and evil, offering a nuanced take on loyalty, strategy, and the sacrifices made in the name of stability. Thrawn doesn't view himself as a villain. He is, in his mind, a guardian of order who believes that his actions, however ruthless, are justified for the greater good. This perspective would provide a fresh narrative that defies the oversimplified character arcs often seen in Disney's recent Star Wars efforts, allowing audiences to engage with a character whose motives are neither purely selfish nor entirely noble. Given Thrawn's complex motivations and unique approach to power, a movie centered around him would not require heavy reliance on traditional Star Wars tropes. The Force, lightsabers, and the traditional Jedi versus Sith conflict could take a backseat, allowing for a story that emphasizes tactical mind games, political maneuvering, and cultural insight. This type of narrative would feel grounded and mature, appealing to fans who crave more than just visual spectacle. A Thrawn movie could showcase his ascension through the ranks, his encounters with Imperial leaders, and his interactions with characters who challenge his views, elements that could give audiences a richer, more layered perspective on the Star Wars universe. Unlike the disposable antagonists that populate much of Disney's Star Wars series, Thrawn's interactions with other characters would serve as pivotal points in the story, each encounter shedding light on his philosophy and strategic thinking. Disney's The Acolyte series, for example, has attempted to delve into the Sith and the dark side of the Force, promising an exploration of morally complex themes. However, early reception suggests that the series may ultimately fall back on formulaic characterizations, where dark side users are portrayed as little more than power-hungry individuals without the intellectual and moral depth that make figures like Thrawn so intriguing. Thrawn's approach to his goals, on the other hand, is rooted in logic and culture, with motivations that extend far beyond personal ambition. A Thrawn movie could introduce a more cerebral, intellectually stimulating form of conflict, moving away from the hackneyed themes of raw power and megalomania that often characterize Disney's portrayals of dark side characters. Furthermore, a Thrawn film would provide Disney with an opportunity to develop a different kind of Star Wars story, one that relies on intrigue, strategy, and suspense rather than flashy combat sequences or relentless nostalgia. While Disney's Star Wars series often include cameos and references to beloved characters or events to capture fan interest, this tactic can come across as forced or shallow, ultimately undermining the integrity of the story. Thrawn's narrative, however, doesn't require constant callbacks to familiar characters or locations to be compelling. His journey and his challenges are interesting in their own right, allowing for a fresh and focused story that stands independently within the Star Wars universe. Disney's tendency to overload Star Wars content with references and cameos can detract from the character's development, and Thrawn's story provides a perfect chance to break free from this formula. A Thrawn movie could be set in unexplored regions of the galaxy, showcasing unfamiliar worlds and new alien species, enriching the Star Wars universe in ways that feel organic rather than forced. Thrawn's role as an outsider, both as a Chiss within the Empire and as a character whose values differ from traditional Imperial doctrine, could highlight new cultural and philosophical perspectives that expand Star Wars lore without relying on the same nostalgic touchstones. Ultimately, Thrawn deserves a movie not only because he is a fan favorite, but because his character represents an intellectual, culturally rich side of Star Wars that has been largely absent in Disney's recent offerings. A film about Thrawn would require a level of care and storytelling depth that Disney's Star Wars projects have, unfortunately, often lacked. It would give audiences a story that isn't about flashy battles or simple good versus evil conflict, but one that challenges their perceptions, engages them on an intellectual level, and introduces them to a world where strategy, art, and loyalty drive the narrative. A Thrawn movie, if done right, would not only elevate Star Wars storytelling but could potentially redefine Disney's approach to the franchise. Thrawn's character defies the limitations of Disney's current formulaic approach, offering a unique opportunity to bring back the complex, layered narratives that first made Star Wars so beloved. A well-crafted Thrawn movie could remind audiences that Star Wars has always been about more than just special effects and action sequences. It's about characters with depth, narratives with tension, and a galaxy filled with cultures, philosophies, and ideas waiting to be explored. A Thrawn movie would provide Disney with a rare opportunity to dive into the unexplored and largely untapped aspects of the Star Wars galaxy. Unlike the formulaic narratives that often limit Disney's projects, a film focused on Thrawn would necessitate a fresh approach, prioritizing intellect, subtlety, and long-term character development. Thrawn is not driven by the usual motivations of Star Wars villains, and his story doesn't revolve around a lust for power or a personal vendetta. Instead, his character centers on a genuine commitment to order and an unyielding loyalty to the Chiss Ascendancy. These traits make him an exceptionally intriguing figure, whose complexity could elevate Star Wars storytelling beyond the shallow tropes we see in shows like The Acolyte. One reason Thrawn stands out so strongly is his unparalleled strategic mind, which makes him a formidable adversary for any opponent, Force-sensitive or otherwise. Unlike the villains in Disney's recent Star Wars content, who often seem one-dimensional or driven by basic impulses, Thrawn's brilliance stems from his ability to think several steps ahead, factoring in everything from psychological nuances to cultural characteristics. This intellectual approach provides a thrilling narrative foundation, with a story that could unfold through meticulously planned conflicts and cleverly executed maneuvers. A Thrawn movie would showcase not just physical battles but a cerebral chess match that keeps audiences guessing, a refreshing change from the action-heavy, often predictable storytelling Disney has favored. In crafting a Thrawn-centered film, Disney would have a chance to explore political dynamics within the Empire and the Chiss Ascendancy, an area of Star Wars lore that has largely been ignored. Thrawn's alliances, though often viewed as strategic, also reveal a deeper moral ambiguity, as he aligns himself with the Empire not out of loyalty but as a means to protect his people. This layered motivation makes him neither a typical villain nor a traditional hero. He operates within his own moral framework, making choices that sometimes conflict with conventional ideals but serve a larger purpose. Disney's reluctance to embrace such morally complex characters in recent projects has left a gap in Star Wars storytelling, one that a Thrawn movie could fill by presenting a narrative that refuses to paint in black and white, instead embracing the shades of gray that make his character so compelling. Moreover, Thrawn's unique relationship with art adds an intellectual depth that sets him apart from other characters. In the Star Wars universe, few characters possess such an appreciation for culture, especially within the ranks of the Empire. Thrawn's use of art to understand his enemy's mindset is a fascinating storytelling device that goes beyond traditional tactics, transforming each interaction into a psychological analysis. This unconventional approach to warfare and intelligence gathering would allow Disney to explore themes of culture, perspective, and respect for diversity in a way that adds sophistication to Star Wars storytelling. Audiences would be introduced to an antagonist who doesn't merely seek to conquer but to understand, valuing his adversary's culture even as he plans their defeat. This complexity is absent in the shallow portrayals seen in series like The Acolyte, where villains are often reduced to mere foils for the heroes. A Thrawn movie could also explore the fascinating world of the unknown regions, where Thrawn and the Chiss Ascendancy originate. These regions, largely unexplored in Disney's Star Wars productions, hold countless narrative possibilities. By setting a significant portion of the story in these uncharted territories, Disney could showcase unfamiliar worlds, alien species, and cultures that deepen the Star Wars universe. Thrawn's expertise in navigating these dangerous, unpredictable spaces is a skill that has always set him apart from his Imperial peers, and it would bring a new layer of excitement and mystery to the film. Unlike the familiar settings of Coruscant or Tatooine, the unknown regions would offer a backdrop for unique challenges, new conflicts, and world building that would enrich the galaxy's lore. Beyond the setting, a Thrawn film would benefit from a tone that aligns more closely with psychological thrillers or intense dramas, moving away from the lighter, more accessible approach Disney has often taken. Rather than relying on large-scale battles or CGI-heavy sequences, a Thrawn movie would thrive on tension, suspense, and character-driven storytelling. This shift in tone would resonate with older Star Wars fans, many of whom have grown frustrated with Disney's tendency to simplify narratives for broader appeal. Thrawn's character naturally lends itself to a more mature exploration of themes like loyalty, sacrifice, and the cost of pragmatism, all of which could create a story that feels distinct from the standard Star Wars offerings. Disney's recent Star Wars content has often suffered from a lack of coherent world building and internal consistency, with storylines and character arcs that sometimes feel disjointed or hastily constructed. A Thrawn movie, by contrast, could provide a cohesive narrative that draws on the rich history of the Chiss, the intricacies of Imperial politics, and the complex relationships between Thrawn and his allies and adversaries. The story could follow his rise within the Empire, his clashes with other Imperial leaders, and his ultimate pursuit of goals that defy the simplistic motivations we often see in Disney's antagonists. This type of narrative depth and continuity is precisely what many fans feel has been missing from recent Star Wars projects. Instead of yet another spectacle-driven storyline, a Thrawn film could deliver a sophisticated, tightly woven plot that respects the intelligence of its audience and brings depth to the galaxy's political and military landscape. Thrawn's appeal lies in his mystique, as well as his intellectual prowess, a combination that would allow Disney to tell a story that captivates through subtleties and psychological conflict rather than bombastic action sequences. His understanding of human nature, his respect for his opponents, and his calculated ruthlessness create a unique kind of tension that doesn't rely on typical hero versus villain dynamics. In this way, a Thrawn film would be a chance for Disney to create a Star Wars experience that appeals to fans who are looking for something deeper, something that transcends the repetitive light versus dark narratives Disney has heavily relied on. Instead, audiences would be drawn into a story of conflicting loyalties, philosophical dilemmas, and the cost of preserving order at any price. Another important aspect of Thrawn's character is his relationship with those who work under him. Unlike most Imperial officers, Thrawn is known for his respect toward his subordinates and his fairness in handling command. He recognizes talent and is willing to reward merit, which stands in sharp contrast to the often cutthroat environment of the Imperial hierarchy. This aspect of his character would allow a Thrawn film to explore themes of leadership, loyalty, and respect in a military context, providing a fresh take on the inner workings of the Empire. Thrawn's leadership style is both admired and feared, and it would be intriguing to see how his unconventional methods clash with the more traditional, authoritarian figures within the Empire. His clashes with other high-ranking Imperial officers, who view his methods as overly lenient or unorthodox, would add tension and complexity to the storyline. Finally, Thrawn's loyalty to the Chiss Ascendancy and his commitment to protecting his people introduce a sense of purpose that distinguishes him from the one-dimensional villains often seen in Disney's Star Wars projects. Thrawn's allegiance to the Chiss gives him a depth of purpose that is largely missing in Disney's recent villains, whose motivations rarely extend beyond personal gain or simplistic notions of power. In Thrawn's case, his alignment with the Empire is a means to an end, a temporary alliance to secure resources and protection for his own people in the unknown regions. This loyalty to a cause beyond himself not only humanizes him, but also sets him apart as a character with a grander, more complex vision. A Thrawn movie would be a chance to explore this dynamic, presenting a character whose actions, though ruthless at times, are driven by a genuine desire to protect his own civilization. A Thrawn-centered movie could redefine the Star Wars villain archetype, proving that not every antagonist needs to be an embodiment of evil. Thrawn's blend of logic, loyalty, and ambition represents a kind of villain that is both relatable and terrifying, a man whose actions make sense within his worldview, even if they appear ruthless to outsiders. This nuanced perspective would offer audiences a refreshing alternative to Disney's recent characters, who often lack the moral complexity and layered motivations that define Thrawn. With the right treatment, a Thrawn movie could set a new standard for Star Wars storytelling, proving that intelligence, subtlety, and character depth can be just as compelling as lightsaber battles and space chases. Disney's approach to Star Wars has undeniably brought the franchise to new audiences, but in doing so, it has often sacrificed depth, complexity, and intellectual substance. With an over-reliance on nostalgia, formulaic characters, and spectacle-driven narratives, Disney's Star Wars films and series frequently fall short of the richer, more compelling storytelling that longtime fans associate with the expanded universe. Characters are often shallow, with one-dimensional motivations, and plots tend to follow predictable arcs. While these efforts have provided moments of entertainment, they rarely delve into the profound themes, moral ambiguities, and sophisticated character arcs that defined classic Star Wars lore. In contrast, a character like Grand Admiral Thrawn embodies the kind of layered complexity and strategic brilliance that Disney's Star Wars currently lacks. Thrawn is a nuanced figure, motivated by loyalty, cultural appreciation, and an almost frightening dedication to order. His story does not require flashy action or heavy nostalgia. Instead, it demands an intellectual approach that respects audiences' desire for deeper engagement. By focusing on Thrawn's unique perspective, his complex loyalties, and his tactical mind, Disney has an opportunity to create a truly compelling, cerebral narrative that would stand as a refreshing departure from their current formula. Thrawn offers an antidote to the superficial villains and heroes that often populate Disney's Star Wars projects, a character who challenges the simplicity of good versus evil with a worldview rooted in strategic ambiguity and cultural respect. In bringing Thrawn to the forefront, Disney could inject Star Wars with a much-needed dose of sophistication and character-driven storytelling. Thrawn's story has the potential to explore the unexplored, challenge traditional Star Wars narratives, and satisfy fans who long for a return to the depth and moral complexity that made the galaxy far, far away so captivating. A Thrawn-centered movie isn't just an exciting prospect, it's the cure for the weaknesses that have plagued Disney's Star Wars productions, offering a path forward that honors the franchise's legacy and invites audiences to think, question, and engage with a galaxy that feels boundless once more.